Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Cross Border Talks. We are meeting this time just moments after the Austrian parliamentary elections, a very important event for anyone interested in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, or European politics in general. And we will seek explanations and more understanding on the outcome of these elections from Sebastian Schäffer, who is the head of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, a think tank based in Vienna. Sebastian is an author of numerous articles on regional issues, Austrian relations with neighbours, and not only. And this time we are going to ask him questions on internal Austrian politics, but also on what will change in the relations between Austria and the neighbours with the victory of the far right in the parliamentary elections. So, Sebastian, thank you very much for having accepted our invitation to be the Cross Border Talks guest.
Thank you very much, Margojata. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and your colleagues.
Yep, and at this moment, I'd like to remind everybody listening to us that Cross Border Talks is visible on all key social media platforms, including YouTube channel. And not to miss any of the talks we will record in the future, it's the best solution is to subscribe the channel. So after this short technical announcement, let us go back to Austrian elections. So the victory of the Freedom Party of Austria is not a total surprise to anybody. In fact, it is not a sudden rise of a new political force, like in case of some of the far-right forces in different European countries, but it is a step forward for a party who enjoys a solid electoral basis, who had participated in government already and not far ago. Yet what are the reasons for this first victory, not a high position, not a good result, but actually a victory? What were the main topics of this campaign, and how did Herbert Kickl win Austrian hearts?
Well, yes, it's right. It's not a total surprise because they've been leading, I think, for the past couple of years in the polls, and as a famous Austrian pollster says, the election is not decided on the eve of the electoral day, but rather in the 4 or 5 years, in this case the parliament has 5 years of a term before. Now, it's a very peculiar and interesting result in a sense, nevertheless, I would say, because it is far more clear than I had expected. I would have thought that the difference between the Austrian People's Party and the far-right party FPÖ will be much closer. And I am also, I'm a German citizen, so I'm not allowed to vote in Austria, but I'm also a bit baffled by the Austrian voters that only 5 years after the Ibiza video surfaced, they vote this party on the first place, which has never happened before in the history of the Second Republic. And what was his success? What did Kickl do right? No pun intended, but exactly that. He focused on topics that are the one thing that the far right in Europe probably can agree on, and this is migration, integration, and asylum. And we have seen also a very personalized electoral campaign for centering around Herbert Kickl that used the rhetoric of saying, like, I am your tool for making Austria, he didn't say great again, but better, safer, close the borders. He was fantasizing about a Fortress Austria, and this apparently resonated with a third of the voters and made him the most successful candidate in this electoral campaign. One more sentence maybe to the electoral campaign. It has been, contrary to the last two elections, very, I would say, collegial, not attacking the candidates personally, trying to find flaws of the others, but at the same time there is also a clear lack of international politics. The European Union was not mentioned at all, and the dominant topics, apart from this topic that drove Kickl to the first place with migration, integration, asylum, was especially security and terrorism, the neutrality of Austria, and then to lesser extent also the situation regarding social security, inflation, high prices, and so on and so forth.
Shall we expect a united right-wing government right now? It is up to the President Alexander Van der Bellen to decide who gets the mission to form the government. And the first signals from the People's Party suggested that if Herbert Kickl is to be the new chancellor, then they would not join such a government. But what if he actually gives up on the leading position? Is it possible that Austria will be run by the coalition between FPÖ and ÖVP?
If the situation would have been the other way around, that the People's Party is on the first place and the FPÖ is on the second place, I believe we would see such a coalition as most likely outcome. But the Chancellor Nehammer has clearly stated during the electoral campaign, and also yesterday, immediately after the results have been published, that he will stick to his promise, that he will not make a coalition with Herbert Kickl. And as the FPÖ is now on the first place, I think it will be very hard for Kickl to not demand becoming chancellor. I think he has much more to gain actually from the spin of saying that all the other parties do not want to work with me. These are the old system parties, something that he has also mentioned during the electoral campaign, despite the fact that he is probably the most systemic politician of all lead candidates, as he is a professional politician for decades already, and has already been in government as interior minister in the last coalition between the ÖVP and the FPÖ. So here I believe Nehammer will stick to his promise. The question is, will Nehammer remain as the leader of the ÖVP? And if that changes, or if really the FPÖ would say, no, we do not insist on Kickl becoming chancellor and or minister, there is a possibility that we will see this, but it's much more likely that we will have a coalition of the ÖVP with the Social Democrats, and then maybe also with the Neos. I don't see the Greens at the moment, but the electoral result now, surprisingly for me, again, also sees the possibility to have a coalition between the ÖVP and the SPÖ, as they would have enough mandates. A small majority, but they would have enough mandates.
So we could see an Austrian variation of the Great Coalition, the coalition between Social Democrats and the Conservative Party. But I would like to go back for a second to the Ibiza affair that you mentioned, and the fact that the Austrian neutrality was one of the heavily discussed topics during this campaign. If the voters were so quick to forget Ibiza and the promises given to a Russian representative of the Russian oligarchy in that affair, if neutrality came to the fore in the debates, does it mean that the Austrian voters expect a kind of splendid isolation of their country on the international scene? Do they want Austria to withdraw from supporting Ukraine and for anything like this?
What the election has shown is that there is not the Austrian voter, but there is, of course, a party that advocates for all these things that you have just mentioned, and that is the Freedom Party. And there, I would believe that if we look at the reasons why this party has been elected by the voters, that it is to a great extent the reason because they set these topics in their electoral campaign. What you have mentioned, the withdrawal of support of Ukraine, or rather like make peace with Russia, because then we can go back to as it has been, and then everything will be cheaper and everything will be easier, which of course is not going to be the case. But well, populists say populist things, and much more. I would say the reason here was though the promise of shutting down the borders and not letting any foreigners into Austria. Again, the image and also the rhetoric was Fortress Austria, which is of course absolutely impossible, not only because you would be violating European law, but as a country, as a small country, let's say medium-sized country as Austria is, you cannot live in Central Europe and live on a secluded, closed island of happiness that Kickel is painting, especially because we see in Austria not only the necessity of having people coming to the country, because we also have the same demographic challenges that each and every other EU country has, to various degrees, but Austria certainly does need skilled migration, and of course it's a touristic country, and one of the major benefits is that they are in the heart of Europe, that they are in the European Union, that they have the euro, that they have open borders, etc., etc. So for me, the baffling thing is like, what is, have we not learned not only from Ibiza, but also have we not learned from the Brexit and the challenges that they are facing? Do we really believe that if a former major economic power that is not directly connected to the continent is struggling with cutting ties with the European Union, a country that is barely a fifth of the size will have the possibility to act in a same way, and as if this is not something that would be drastically self-harming.
That's why I am very skeptical when I read also on the Polish media announcements of an Austrian exit from European Union. I do believe that the Austrian political class is well aware of the factors that you have just mentioned, that Austria is benefiting very much from being located in center of the United Europe with open borders and everything else. Still, are we going to see a right-wing coalition and the right-wing coalition ruling Austria, if there is a right-wing coalition, of course, entering in an ever closer alliance with Viktor Orban's Hungary and trying to influence the European Union from inside rather than from getting out? And perhaps not only with Viktor Orban, but also other partners who are already in the fraction of Patriots for Europe, the faction in the European Parliament that the FPÖ is a part of.
Yes, definitely. I mean, what you mentioned with the pro-Europeanness of the political elite within Austria, I was very relieved yesterday when I saw that not only the federal president has mentioned that the next government has to be observing all the values that Austria wants to stand for, but also be pro-European. And if we look at 4 of the 5 parties that enter parliament, they have clearly stated that they want to have a pro-European government without someone like Herbert Kickl, who believes in conspiracy theories, who undermines the European Charter for Human Rights, who has advocated for using deworming medicine instead of the corona vaccination. So this is something that assures me a little bit. However, it at the moment hinges a lot on people. And so if Chancellor Nehammer is not there anymore, or if Kickl really would step into the second row for whatever reason, then I could see that we might end up in a situation where there is a arrangement of a far-right government. And we have seen in the last the last coalition between ÖVP and FPÖ that certain tendencies towards transforming aspects of the Austrian state more into what Viktor Orban has done to Hungary have been there. And I think one thing that we really should keep in mind, Herbert Kickl has not been chancellor before, but he has been minister for the interior. He has very much damaged the standing of the Austrian intelligence and counterintelligence services. Not everything is completely shared anymore within the partners in Europe. And we have seen a pattern with Viktor Orban, with Robert Fico, and I am afraid that we might also see this pattern when Andrej Babiš comes back, potentially next year in Czechia, that if they come a second time, they will do anything to assure that they will not lose office again. And I could definitely see this with Herbert Kickl. I could definitely see that he, when he gets into power, that he will try to ensure that he will not have to leave again. And this is the danger, and this is the transformation that we see. And it's also no secret that the Patriots for Europe have been initially funded in Vienna by Kickl, Babiš, and Orban. So we see these tendencies, we see this development, and I mean that the FPÖ is not a entirely big fan of the rule of law and the democratic system that Austria has had in the past decades is also no secret. Otherwise, you would not be in this wonderful friendship contract with Jedinaya Russia, even if it's not prolonged and whatsoever. But we see where the overall ideas come from. We see where the overall goal is to go. And ultimately, we have had so many instances that they try to frame as single instances, but there have been multiple instances of anti-Semitic, far-right utterings from people within the party that we also will have to see and openly talk about the fascist tendencies that are in this party.
So, do you think that if a right-wing government of Austria with the participation of FPÖ is formed, do you believe that this cooperation between them and Orban, possibly Babiš from next year, will also have an influence of the overall European course? Would they try to transform Europe from inside into a Europe which is more anti-migration or more, I won't dare say more fascist, but you said it yourself that there is such current in the party.
Absolutely. I mean, we see that already. We see these tendencies in the Patriots for Europe. We see that this is there, that they are trying to do this. We also see that, I mean, it's almost a decade now that we have that challenge with migration and integration. I would decouple it a little bit from asylum seekers because it's connected, but it's a complex topic. Nevertheless, for a decade, these things are going on. And this is dominating the discourse, although we have much bigger challenges on a European level, which we also have seen just recently with this catastrophic floodings that happened not only in Austria, but along the Danube region up to Poland. And there's so many other challenges that we should talk about, that we need to deal with. First and foremost, of course, the destruction of the security architecture with the unjustified and absolutely disproportionate invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. And what do we talk about? We talk about migration, foreigners. And it's absurd in itself that countries come together that have migration amongst each other within the European Union, because it's due to being part of the single market, of course, possible, but make electoral campaigns on the backs of each other's citizens. And there is no solution coming from those parties to offer anything substantially that would make the life of any person in any of these countries better. But still they win elections, and they influence the discourse already on the European Union, because they do not have an interest that this topic is actually resolved, because it gives them votes. And this is something that Viktor Orban has been showing, especially with the Migration and Asylum Pact on the European Union, but also before the situation that you could have made a burden sharing already back in 2015, that we need a reform of the Dublin III system has been apparent for decades now, and we are not tackling it. Other parties also have to accept that they have no good offer, no proper ideas and solutions for these topics, although they are out there. But nobody puts it in their electoral program. And then the far right exploits these topics and wins elections and erodes not only our values that we thought for granted after 1945, but is actively, as you have said, undermining also the European Union from within.
Migration question was also raised in the relations between Austria and Romania and Bulgaria, as Austria vetoed their entrance into full Schengen due to concerns on migration exactly. Are you expecting something to change on that, or it will get only worse?
Well, here we have to wait really who will be in government. And I mean, if Herbert Kickl will be in government and if the FPÖ will be in government, I do not expect that anything will improve. Things will get worse. That's clear. If we have a pro-European government, which would be any coalition without the FPÖ, then I believe that there is possibility for development, because I believe that all four other parties, the People's Party, the Social Democrats, the Neos, and the Green Party, will understand that if they form a coalition in whatever shape or form against the FPÖ, they will have 5 years of lamenting that the FPÖ is not part of the government, and that this is undemocratic, which is, of course, another populist phrase, another blatant lie, because in a parliamentary, representative, democratic system, you need to find a majority. And if you do not have a majority, then you are not in government. And if they find a majority against you, even if you have 49.9%, then you have to accept that. But of course, Kickl will exploit that, the FPÖ will exploit that, and there is a danger that if they are not successful, the next government, that the FPÖ will only get stronger in the next election. I still don't see that they will get an absolute majority, but you never know. There are things that can influence drastically these kind of developments, and if they're not successful, the next government, this will certainly help the FPÖ. I have the feeling that all other four parties have understood that, and therefore I'm slightly optimistic that hopefully we will get a pro-European government that will then use the opportunity much better, by the way, than what they are doing in Germany, for a reform coalition that would actually not only tackle challenges on the domestic level, but also on the European level.
And integrating Romania and Bulgaria into full Schengen is definitely one of the challenges of European enlargement, of the future development of the European Union. So let us also have a look at even further international challenges. So how is there a role that Austria could play in the conflict in the Middle East, in the crisis that is going on together after 7th October, with the invasion, with the bombing of Gaza, and now with the ongoing crisis in Lebanon, with Israeli bombing of Lebanon? Do you see a role for Austria in shaping the new security architecture? Because the security architecture of the world is crumbling not only with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it's also crumbling in the Middle East.
Now, this is absolutely out of my area of expertise. What is happening in the Middle East? What I would see, though, of course, is this what Austria has been doing very well in the history of the Second Republic, that they act as a bridge builder, as a neutral country that could serve as a hosting ground for negotiations to find solutions. But here again, I mean, the major question is going to be, what kind of government will we see? Because as I have said, the FPÖ is in its core blatantly anti-Semitic, and therefore there is a challenge where I would see that a Israeli delegation could see a Chancellor Kickl as an honest broker. All other parties, again, I would see more possibilities, but as long as we don't know what the next government will look like, and I believe we will see here quite some time of an development. I expect a couple of months until that happens, and I don't know if there is enough time for solving pressing issues in the Middle East at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, Austria, the bridge builder, is a country that could play a positive role in Europe and on a global scale. But Fortress Austria, that the far-right party is trying to promise to their voters, would be a nightmare. Not only to the neighbours of Austria, but ultimately also to the Austrians themselves, for the reasons that were named in this interview. Thank you very much for this talk. Our guest was Sebastian Schäffer, head of the Institute for the Danube region and Central Europe, the Vienna-based think tank. I hope that we managed to answer some of your doubts, questions, and explain more facts, the background on the Austrian elections that happened recently. Thank you very much, Sebastian, for accepting our invitation and being with us today.
Thank you very much, Margajata. Always a pleasure, and I'll happily return when the dust has settled and some new Austrian government is approaching in a couple of months. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And at the last moment, I just remind everybody listening to us to subscribe to Cross Border Talks and to follow us on Facebook, X, or other social platforms, not to miss any episodes or article we publish. Thank you very much for being with us today.